what is the best way to convey our anger? This is a question which has been asked to me several times. How do you express your anger? Are we not supposed to express anger? And the answer is yes, definitely we are. The three more very, very common ways of expressing our anger would be, of course, expression, where people are willing to discuss, or people tend to start shouting. Now that's also a form of expression. Suppression. Now suppression is something which, as the word implies, isn't very healthy. And I can share it from my own experience. There was a time when I used to suppress my anger, believing it is perhaps rather negative to communicate the anger or that feeling of anger. When, of course, after a period of time, I realized that is not the case. So that then, as I said, first is expression, then is suppression, all right? And then we come to calming down. Now, when you talk about calming down, it is a state where you just tell yourself, calm down. And after a while, it's not that you start thinking about how you're going to tackle the issue, but it's something where you just probably decide, oh, well, it's all right. And you move on. Now, that is something which also can be extremely negative. And now from all the three, as probably a lot of you would have guessed by now, expression is the best, which is, of course, getting into a very positive state of discussing what the issue is, what the problem is, so that you're able to resolve the problem and move forward. Incident which happened in my life many years ago. When I was in college, I had wonderful neighbors, and one day there was someone who had come to their home with their children, and I have met this lovely family who have just come visiting at my neighbor's place. I've seen them several times. So when I said, I just thought I'll say hello, and I just said, hello, how are you? And immediately I knew the person knew who I was, but said, what do you want? And I was like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I just thought I'll say hello. And then the lady said, I'll call you back, and then put the phone down. And she sounded so angry. And probably around maybe 2 hours or 3 hours later, this lady calls back and says, I'm so sorry. I was actually scolding my children, and that's the time when you had called. So it could be very misplaced, the reason for anger. So probably she was just scolding and saying, why are you behaving the way you do? And that's the time when she might have received my call. And probably at that moment when I lifted up the call, she said, yeah, what do you want? So it was a situation where I was not meant to be the recipient of the anger, but I happened to become one, being there at the wrong time. So I think that is one of the things that we need to remember, that sometimes it is not the reason, we may not be the reason for the anger. There could be some reasons that, unlike this one, it could be something else which could be triggering this. It could also be very much, unfortunately, related to anxiety issues or depression, which can also lead a person to become unexpectedly angry without much provocation. Now, I think we've already discussed about some of the physical symptoms before. Now, there's also a question which has been asked, how can we transform anger into a much more healthier feeling? How do we get ourselves to probably transform this extremely concerning or deeply affecting emotion into something positive? Yes, it is definitely positive. Our anger can be looked at as a way that we are able to evolve ourselves into a person who is more confident and more assertive. Now, how do we do that? Every time we are in a situation where we know we are getting provoked, sit back and think for a moment, what is our goal and purpose in that situation? I remember a friend of mine mentioning to me, this is an incident which comes to my mind. A friend of mine who mentioned to me that a couple of years ago, her son needed an admission into an institute, and her daughter was already there in the institute. And she had already spoken to one of the management members of the management, who had said, yes, of course, no problem, your son has got the admission. And unfortunately, this was not communicated to another member of the management. So when she was speaking to this other gentleman, this gentleman said, yes, what do you want? So it already hadn't started off on a very comfortable footing. And she said that I've just called you because I wanted to inform that my son has got admission, and he would be also joining in. And immediately this gentleman said, no, he has not got admission. How can you just say that? So she said, no, that she was informed. No, but it's not possible just because your daughter has got the admission. It's not possible sometimes just to give you an admission for your son. So this lady said, if you don't mind, can you please check and get back? And after around maybe 10-15 minutes, this gentleman calls back and says, yes, your son has got admission. There was no apology, but he did say that the son has got admission. So what happened here is, by being assertive, that is, this lady had decided to choose or decide on how she would like to respond to the person who was actually provoking her with annoyance and probably even anger. But if she had decided to respond to this gentleman by exactly mirroring his statements or his anger, things could have been very unpleasant. But she had kept the focus on what was the goal in mind and where did she want to be at the end of the conversation. That is, of course, ensure that her son has got the admission, which anyway he had, but the other gentleman needed to be convinced, which is what she did. So that is one way of looking at a situation where being assertive, you may be provoked, but being assertive and keeping your goal on full focus, that is a way you're able to calm down and think with a lot more rational way of approach.